Referring to the pioneering classes that it was full of wahala, we didn't know what we were doing. Somehow we swam through. Are there MIS people here? No, this is pure marketing option. So that took care of itself. How will I operate this keyboard, right? I don't have a lot of slides, don't worry. So I normally talk to just 4 slides.
Okay.
So that won't be too strong. I like to refer to what I did in the past because it puts it all in context. I am not coming with very elegant academic references. I'm coming with corporate references. So my background to date, I've always mixed the sales and marketing that I do with systems, with risk management, with everything else that I've studied, including engineering and everything, because my parents told me that my education was a big investment. So when I practiced one for a while, then I stopped that job and go and start another one, so that I have experience in everything I studied, and I don't get to a stage where. So it looks a bit cluttered, but yes, today I work as effectively sales director of MTN. I used to work in the enterprise space for MTN, so maybe since the structure of banks is better known to people, it's almost like I'm doing the retail now, and I used to do the corporate. And I've done consulting in the past for various consulting houses. I've worked for the fast-moving consumer goods industry, but I said the introduction about me would not be elaborate, so we move on from there. Very importantly, though, I did a little teaching. I hope you saw that at Kimpa and Ashesi for 1 year. It was very important that I would see what was accounting for the health and vitality of Bobinson. So I came and tried and experienced it, and I realized that research is not for the faint-hearted. So I returned back to corporate where we don't publish. But yes, so that's the reflections that I wanted to speak to. It's quite simple that at the moment, what we try to look at in what we do, for example, at MTN, is to see what constitutes us and what ties together the whole proposition in the market, in the life of the consumer, in the life of the person that is patronizing our services. Now, today you hear the discussion about the brand space, and unfortunately, even though the notions should have evolved by now, there's a certain tendency to still look at what is happening in the creative side, what is happening in the communication side as brand management. But this has affected many organizations to the point where in the space of ranking of market share, of survival, of attributes that will determine their long-term strategic health, they are suffering. Because if you take brand management into the space of just what you communicate about the brand consciously, then obviously your consumer is going to wonder many times what you are doing. At MTN, we've tried to make it completely different from that. So when I came to MTN, I used to work for Airtel before MTN. I've worked in many places, we'll not talk about that. But when I came to MTN 5 years ago, I remember that our chief executive at the time had that dilemma, that there had to be a way in which we reconstitute everything and bear in mind that it has to be relevant and top of mind to the consumer. Now, at that time, all our research was showing, for example, that the consumer wanted to talk about service delivery. He wanted to talk about network quality. He wanted to talk about service touch points, where they could go when there was pain, but also where they could go to acquire. And all of that was not properly defined because the definition of brand management at the time had concentrated a bit too much on the themes around communication. So a lot of projects were set up, and I remember most important among them was the customer experience project, where you had to walk the journey. You had to put your shoes in yourself in the shoes of the customer and breathe as they breathe, and then get to know what you needed to change. Now, what that did for us was it took us through some very painful hurdles. Some of you who recall what gets published in the media, in 2012, MTN was actually banned from activating new customers because we had many operational challenges. We had some outages that I remember getting the text message. I felt like framing it because it doesn't happen every day that 5 million subscribers go off the network. But those kinds of things were happening about 4 years ago. And the normal reaction is your customers are in pain. Let's explain our challenges. You switch on any radio right now and you realize how confused we are sometimes. The electricity bills are wrong. So the billing manager comes on radio to explain that he's doing some software and during the implementation some data is not well captured and you should do this. And the customer is not interested in your operations. The customer wants a correct bill. So to the extent that you have to come and explain, you have already not managed your identity, you've not managed your brand, you've not managed the experience. And that mistake is happening in many, when you talk about power, then it's something else. Because yesterday I actually listened to a program where they wanted us to understand what car power will do and what will be made up for by the new liquefied natural gas plant and how that will contribute to the shortfall, etc., etc. Do you really care?
No, we don't.
I don't think this is the substance of service. All you need is to switch a light and for it to come on. And if it doesn't come on, then you actually need some compensation. You need something quite tangible to be able to take it up from there. But we've redefined it and we've put everything around communication. So do what you like, but explain it. And don't forget that these things are tying closely to the absence of a real corporate identity. Because corporate governance is completely different from domestic governance. So when you say at home that there's a problem, and then you are told that, in tree you say, and then in casa, like speak to the person there because they are human as well. They'll feel your pain. You can do that at home, and maybe there'll be people there to listen all the time. But in a corporate setting, you are supposed to go by certain performance metrics, and when the person has given value, you also expect that a certain decency is attached to what he's done. We are not getting that. We nearly slipped into that space. That's why I'm talking about the whole customer experience project, the launch of it, the definition of new standards by which we should run a business. So I'll give you an interesting reference point. Engineers that we used to work with, they used to be measured by availability of the network. Availability is measured by our own systems. So I can flip a switch now and it tells me the systems are 99% available because all radios are on and all transmission cables are not cut. But maybe you cannot initiate a call. Maybe something is going on. So we change some of those metrics that the calls are coming to the call center, the complaints. We want that target to be on an engineer as well. Because it doesn't matter what he's done. Whatever is available, is set up, is whatever. If a customer complained, that customer is not an idiot. He has better things to do than to call MTN to say I can't make calls. If he could, I can't make calls from a specific location. If he could. So those targets, we started to level across the organization to share and then have a uniform philosophy of what we want to be and what we want to be, how we want our customer to experience us. The important thing is that it's a journey. I like the early literature, so forgive me when I go back to that. But the writings of Deming and so on in the early 80s, one of the things that they identified as central in total quality management was continuous improvement. The reason that philosophy is there as central is that there's an admission that society is never perfect. So from the day that your staff come to work and say that everything that we can do, we've done, then you realize you need new staff or you need a new leader. Maybe you need to go because there's nothing like that. There's no paradigm like perfection. So under those circumstances, even today as we speak, as I speak about some of the projects we did as though they were past. But one of the biggest things that we need is to challenge ourselves constantly in that space. And that is what I meant by brands are the entire engagement. Because we cannot isolate it into pockets and start to deal with one aspect without dealing with the other. It is the customer that defines for us what the priority should be in our brand management. Having said that, I say with a lot of emphasis as well, that the adoption is the puzzle. Resonance with consumers is most important. Because what we are saying about adoption is that these things are ethereal. These things are very difficult to define. There comes a moment when, again, we go to the old literature, when Coca-Cola customers demonstrated against Coca-Cola, it is a sign that people have now begun to live the substance of what you are communicating. And they do not feel that you can change it. They do not feel that you can just get up. And I'll give you that example. About 3 months ago, we were rationalizing our offerings. We made a mistake. Those of you who do not operate at the level of the portfolio that Victor Sam operates, Victor Sam and Co will buy 300 CD bundle unlimited, because those are the seniors. But there are also people who buy 1 CD bundle. In the course of the optimization, we can say one of the learning points was that we dropped a certain small bundle because we thought, well, it's catered for by some other offerings. Next day on our Facebook page, you could see, and the reaction was, one of the ones I read, I remember so well. He said, if you've got your money, I haven't got my own. So bring it back. I buy 1 CD, so what? Why do you think that? So within hours, that part of the portfolio had been restored, because obviously we realized, look, I mean, some of these things you are rationalizing, you are sitting down, you are taking all kinds of decisions, but some things slip through the cracks. And adoption is important, because at the time when the guy will give you feedback, then it means that the guy is still a member of the fraternity you are building. At the time that he walks away, and we all know that in domestic relationships, at the time that your spouse begins to say that everything you are doing is perfect, you know there's a big problem. So in the same way, the feedback loop and so on should be taken very seriously, so that we can internalize the aspects of the brand that we mean to present to the customer as value. Now, the other thing about it resonating is relevance. You see, there was a time when, especially in the 90s, every multinational that I worked for was talking about harmonization. So in British American Tobacco at the time, we were told that the diplomats, are there smokers here? Nobody looks the part. But we were told that the diplomat cigarette is, if you like, in quote unquote, nowhere to be found. We should move the market towards Benson and Hedges, Rothman skin size. We should do things in the international space. When I went to the breweries, it was much the same story. Move people to Amstel Lager, move them to the Heineken brand, you know, because we want to manage these things centrally. All of that failed. A lot of the brands that were extended into international space, etc., had no local relevance. So, fine, you want to go to, 80% of your base has a local brand, you want to withdraw it and migrate them to what you consider as easy to manage. So they leave you. And it's not only an action of, I don't have what I want, but it's an action of, I really want you to fail. So it's a protest action that you've disrespected them for their patronage over the years. And that means that they're going to do something that is also going to be lasting, and that's when things go viral. That's when people start to go into the lobby groups that they know and say, these people are arrogant, let's teach them a lesson. Now, adoption is what you have to switch to make that positive. You have to switch that emotion, that attachment, that energy that the person is using to make it positive, so that in the same way that they felt they need to protest, this time they channel it into an area that you're going to benefit from. The history is where we've a lot of the time gone wrong. Look at a lot of the positioning you see around you. You see, a lot of the time when we want to communicate to the trendy segment of the market, to the youthful segment of the market, we, of necessity, believe that it is Western. And a lot of the orientation and the creativity in the space tries to Westernize the audience without their consent. Now, what you realize is that when I was growing up, people did not even admit that they eat banku at home, because it was as if it was lowly food. I'm telling you, the most expensive menu in Accra today is most of the time banku and tilapia. And it's presented everywhere. You can get it at the highest end of the restaurant space, because people took time. I remember the first joints, one at Achimota Police Station somewhere. They just painted it a bit, put some Pizza Hut type of design around it, and presented banku and tilapia again. Over time, it made it elegant. When I say elegant too, I'm not insulting our forefathers that how they ate it was not elegant, but I'm saying that it became something that was also trendy and something that people could actually create a lot of hype around, that there's a new one coming up here, there's a new one coming up there, etc., etc. Now, you see that in the traditional designs, Kofi in tea and Nalem and Mauli Kujeto and these boys are not the cheapest boys in town. Because at the end of the day, they've taken the traditional, they've taken the history, and they've made something out of it that is very relevant. And that is the aspect of our marketing. That is getting lost on us. Because if you launch a local brand today, it's going to be a very elaborate exercise to go into the space of United Colors of Benetton and then try to enter the retail chains of Western Europe. If it's a sweater, it's a sweater. And they have established certain relationships, they have established certain protection measures that you're going to break. Whereas if, with your history, you are able to redefine the space and present something that is as big a wave as when Kente entered the US market, you begin to make strides that they also cannot make, using the unique advantage of your history. But we've not done that too well. At MTN, what we've tried to do very well, I think, and perhaps why we've been rewarded with market leadership for quite a significant period of the history of the company, is that when we have to do something, we bear in mind the local market. So today we're studying a market research report as the leadership team. The first thing we saw was that Ashanti region was going well in terms of all the feedback that we were getting. That is also feedback into a certain process, because the way we operate in Ashanti, I myself, 3-4 times a year, I'm in Malaysia. At the end, we have to see Commander One, Kofi Boachi. Fortunately, he was in Katanga, so there's a certain bridge that we cross around that as well. Mayor of Kumasi, you approve of him, you don't approve of him, he's the mayor of Kumasi. That position has always been hallowed. So you make sure that those pillars, and when you go for events in Kumasi, you respect the protocols. Because at the end, Kumasi events are stopped to say, Kumasi Penifona Pakwamba. They stop everything. Then they say, Auntie Georgina, Georgia Hotel. You have to follow all those steps to get it right. The Volta region is a completely different puzzle. We have our biggest market share in Ghana is in the Volta region. And that has connotations with a certain other market share that is in the Volta region. But the way it is that those are also areas where you do not offend. You see, that's, people think that it's something so complex and you have to get a certain, very advanced strategy to be able to penetrate that. But it is just that in that market, history is important. Because if you come in and you want to be disruptive, you want to act as though you are a foreigner to the space and you are just visiting, then you'll be treated as such. You also have to expect, when I go to Qatar, I operate in Qatar. When I go to Ho, I operate in Ho. Because the Awemefia is also a very hallowed institution. And Asogli has also become a huge institution. So knowing the history and the conflicts, you don't support one without the other. A salesman told me once when I came to Latte for Ujra, he said, please leave and go to Manfi. And I said, why? I came all the way to this place. And he said, yes, but you didn't plan properly. Latte has 2 factions. And you've come to the Ujra of one and you don't seem to have provision for the other one. So just leave. You are better off not coming than to go for one and then your brand has shown its hand that you are here. I understood what you were saying. Likewise, a guy told me in Yendi that you don't drive past this space because this is where the surveillance camera of the Yana points. You are either stopping to go and greet or then you don't come past at all. So we have to stop and go and see the Yana. But that was very strategic for what we needed. Out of that courtesy call on the Yana, I cannot tell you the mileage that the brand got. I mean, and it still continues to enjoy. Because Ifwa here was the one who eventually, when they were confused that these people talking, are they even from MTN? That was the thing, because we hadn't scheduled anything. So they called the office, and the call was forwarded to Ifwa that some people are here. And one of them says, is this, that. Fortunately, she was aware that I was in Yendi. So the confirmation came very quickly and everything was leveled up. But we got a lot of mileage from that. And I'm saying the history is important because it's not any different. When I worked in Europe for South African breweries, when they came into Eastern Europe and eventually the port breweries in Italy and so on and so forth, one day in a strategy meeting with Heineken people, they said the same thing, that look, they've never seen competition this way before because they assumed that they were Europeans. And therefore, to be able to compete with them under European Union competition regulations, you need to be here. You need to understand the space. Now these guys were actually, at the time, they had not yet done the Submiller merger. So they were operating under the name South African Breweries. African brewery, and then you've come in and you are taking market leadership. But it was very simple because they knew that you can operate in the palaces of the King of Austria, you can also operate in the pub of the red light district. Those two must sequence in Europe all the time because it's a mixture of ruffians and elite, like everywhere else in the world. The guy who needs to go and get, quote unquote, get pissed after work is no different from the guy who also sits in a palace and is idle all week. But the space was easy for them to navigate because when you've lived in Africa all your life, you straddle these things daily. You go to the office in the morning, you are going to meet poverty, you are going to meet wealth sometime in your day. And that was the thing that South African breweries came into Europe with and rewrote the space. Till today, Submiller is the number 2 in the world. And it took a lot of mergers for Interbrew to merge with Ambev, then to merge with Anheuser-Busch, and so on and so forth to get the number 1 position ahead of them. But organically, I mean, we read business cases in the 90s where the Miller brand was written about like a joke. Yeah. I mean, every time it was compared to Budweiser, it was like, you know, the old Coke Pepsi thing, like, you know, somebody is way ahead and is trying to show you. But these guys went and they said Miller Light. The light segment in beer, today, of course, my friend Sichikan is trying to do light on Star and so on and over there. But in the US, it worked very well. And I'm just saying that the history is very important in every market. And the understanding of it is a step in humility. Because you get in, you have the equipment of all the templates that you have the profiles that your corporate organization has given you. But listening to the kids on the street, listening to the old ladies in their retirement chairs and so on and so forth is actually where you finally connect into adoption. Innovation is what kills and makes. Because I work one of my professions is in an area of very short corporate life cycles and product life cycles. I mean, information systems I mean, even in Ghana, when I came out of school, the big thing was a guy called Usu Sechi, Blue Chip. Blue Chip was shipping computers to every office in Ghana and buying Ventos. I'm sorry, I'm betraying my age. Vento is not a car that young men like, but because some knows Vento. But buying Ventos for salesmen and so on and so forth, making a big impact. Usu Sechi disappeared overnight because somewhere within the whole thing, the salesman figured out the supply chain. That Usu Sechi, why you go and buy from here, add margin, and then give me commission. So I go and talk to your supplier as well, and then I start taking orders. So it disappeared overnight. Dr. Kweno, Internet Ghana, network computer systems. Very big. First to bring the internet in, etc., etc., etc. It's gone. NCS, nobody talks about it anymore. Soft drive. I mean, basically, the list goes on and on and on and on because you have to Tara systems. You have to evolve as the market, takes its bends. That has not been the story of an Apple. That has not been the story of a Dell. That has not been the story of an IBM. Because somewhere within it all, interestingly, before I continue on that story, interestingly, there's a book by Andy Grove, who was, I think, the founding CEO of Intel, or just after, but very early in the life of Intel. And the point that he makes all the time is the point about the point of inflection. That as an industry goes along, your skill as a manager is to spot the point of inflection. To spot when something is about to become obsolete. The things that have made you great are about to disappear. IBM had that decision to make in the early 80s. Young man, Bill Gates, fresh and hungry, had been able to connect his way, and now had come with an operating system. That operating system was different from the one that was running on the mainframes of IBM, like the AS400, big machines that had made IBM Big Blue. IBM in the history of America is another story. We can have 2 hours of conversations on that. They had so much legacy that they did not know at that time whether to invest in a small personal computer. Because if you did, then you are accelerating the decline of the big mainframe. If you didn't, somebody else will. And this kind of puzzle, don't underestimate the way it can paralyze management. Sometimes for decades, you'll be sitting there, you don't know whether to go back or to go forward. So by the time IBM woke up and said they wanted to go back, Bill Gates had signed on so many people. DOS was all over the place. As if to be cheeky, the other people were calling their machines IBM compatible machines. But IBM was not a participant. So in the process, towards the late 80s, Lou Gessner came to IBM, I think early 90s. He came and then he had the courage to say, look, the past is gone. We have lost. The personal computer will not come back. So him being a former McKinsey consultant said the strength of IBM is now going to be in services. And then he turned IBM around into the services giant you see today. And today, to all intents and purposes, IBM is back with a big bang. And now they've even had the courage to say they've sold the business on desktop hardware to the Chinese, because they were able to spot the point of inflection, which is what Andy Grove wrote about. Intel is a marvelous company when it comes to that, because they've built processes, they've adapted processes, they've made them smaller, they've been able to participate in the space for a very long time. But it is getting quite threatening, because competition now is a completely different ballgame when you talk about what goes on in the cell phone, Qualcomm, and these other companies that are coming in and building chipsets and so on. The Intel muscle will no longer be the same. But we make this call in MTN every day. We are the market leaders in airtime business. We are by a stretch the market leaders in mobile money, market leaders in data, etc., etc. Today, the electricity corporation is having challenges. Guess where 70,000 of those SIMs and meters come from? Come from MTN. When they came to buy the SIMs, we told them that digital infrastructure is our forte. We can have the conversation about the higher end of the chain, what you are going to put the SIMs into, or we can leave it at the lower end of the chain, and then we are just a pipeline into the process. We do not, by any means, anticipate that the market share in this utility space is going to be measured by number of SIMs. It is a completely different space. It is going to be measured by traffic. It is going to be measured by the products that you have. It is going to be measured by the payment interfaces. It's going to be measured by the customer engagement that you control. It's going to be measured by many other things, because a SIM card in a meter is very little revenue. So today, I could say that we are not the market leaders as far as telecom support for utilities is concerned. But who is the market leader? It may not also be Tigo. It may not also be Airtel. It could be that it is the company they mentioned on radio today was called Computer Management Systems, funded by some donors who came and set up the system, etc., etc., etc. But to be able to get into the space that we need to be in, we might have to redefine the market space to say that today our competitor is Computer Management Systems. Today they are in the driver's seat. Today there's a problem. So the onus is on us to have the conversation to say, if we revisit our old advice on the matter, we might be able to integrate further upwards and then put a service delivery platform in between, and something different might happen on the alignment of today's customer complaints. It is also not a guarantee. It's a risk that people take, because if you do that implementation and things go wrong, your brand that has worked so well for other segments that you've been in is jeopardized by a new discussion that you've started. That's why some people at some point might even decide to create a new brand. Go into utilities with a different face. And then let's try and keep things. Basically, all those conversations have to be held, because telecommunication is one sector, but we have what we call adjacent sectors. So in the same way we went into banking, and today the business we do in financial services is probably bigger than 60% of the banks in the country. In the same way, we will perhaps go into public health, perhaps we'll go into utilities, perhaps we'll go into agriculture. This morning, I don't know how many of you were listening to Isoko, but when they want an authoritative voice on the state of cassava supply chain today, they don't ask the Ministry of Agri, they ask Isoko, because they are controlling digital inputs into the sector. And they know that the pricing is trending this way, the stock situation is trending this way, and the dispersion of the various elements of the chain are also telling this story. I'm saying this because innovation is what takes you through all these. But innovation is people. So to be able to confidently say that your business is in a healthy space, you have like the likes of Apple and so on to invest in a certain core of innovators who the organization does not paralyze. Because if you've worked in any big organization, maybe it's time to where do you work?
Of insurance.
So that's a great example of what I speak of. This is a closed forum. We can say anything, right?
Say anything.
Okay. So I'll tell you, June 3rd just passed, right? June 3rd last year, we went to Kwame Nkrumah Circle. We had a program, we're doing it now, 21 days of yellow care, where tomorrow I'll be at the Equipment School for the deaf. We basically try to give back to society. But we had that program same time last year. And health insurance, June 3rd came in and disrupted it because people had died. I mean, you had to do something there. So we went to Kwame Nkrumah Circle to help with the cleanup. But frankly, when I got there, I felt that for the level of the institutional influence that we have as MTN, we had pitched in at a level that the society expects us to pitch in higher. You know what I mean? Because you see, like when 9/11 happened, IBM came to ground zero, and immediately the US Department of Homeland Security at the time, that time they had not been formed, but the guys who were managing the crisis at the time said that with IBM here, it means that all volunteer organizations that have come to ground zero have to be networked now. They have to be put into a database. Coordination has to be facilitated because these are the masters of that kind of game. These are the guys who did Project Manhattan, the creation of the atomic bomb. So this ground zero is not a thing they cannot manage. So they pitched IBM in there at that level that if you do all this for us, then the rescue effort will go on. We don't need you to go and carry blocks because that is not your forte. So I saw the Kwame Nkrumah Circle site as that story came to my mind immediately that Zoom Lion is here and Zoom Lion is cleaning the rubbish. Is it really the best effort we can make that we also only assist Zoom Lion? So I called a friend of mine, you know Winfred Agbebo, a gentleman. So I called him and I said, Winfred, I want to see Sylvester Mensah now. That was the last week before Nono took over. So I got there and Sylvester said, look, talk to Nono. The transition is almost done. So I spoke to him and I said, look, this is the dilemma. I think that I'm better off creating a registration point right now for all these burns victims that you have to come and do the insurance. Because the hospitals are not treating them anymore. The hospitals have run out of funds to be able to handle all those burns and so on. We will use the MTN Foundation to put some seed money. Health insurance is 24 cities. Is this still 24 cities?
24.
So for people to be dying because they don't have health insurance cards was quite a scandal. So Nunu fortunately bought into the idea immediately, called the Plotte scheme manager. I think he's called Peter. He called the guy.